Well, first off, thank you for a great debate. It was very lively. We would like to restate, as we did in our beginning statement, that although the UN Security Council is not an ideal formation, we do believe that it reflects political reality. And in order for these important political, military, and economic powers to buy into the United Nations as a system, we need to preserve this right for them to have the veto power, even if it isn't ideal in all situations. If they were to buy into the system and they were to opt out of the United Nations, it would lose all of its political significance and relevance. And while sometimes it may not run as effective as we would like in a perfect world, I think that we can all agree that the United Nations actually does have a point, and it's really an amazing institution. We have peacekeeping missions around the world. We have UNESCO. We've got UNICEF. There's amazing institutions within the United Nations that need to be preserved and protected. And if these economic powers funding the UN weren't to buy into the system because they lost this right, it would be a disaster. And our last point is that the United Nations veto actually protects some of the worst escalation militarily between these powers. It keeps a balance, and it keeps from preventing rash action moving forward in circumstances that could escalate, particularly military situations. As we saw in the Cold War, we had two world powers, the United States and the USSR, going against one another. Thank you again.
Thank you. Our main problem with our opponent's argument is that we have proven to you that based on what the United Nations was founded to do, it was founded to represent the voice of the world and to solve global problems. And our argument is that the veto has failed to do that. They admitted that the veto is not perfect, but they have failed to prove that it is even better than the alternative. So let's reiterate our first argument. It is completely unfair that in a global decision-making process, one country can stop the will of the entire world simply because they want to protect their money, their interests, or their friends. Secondly, it prevents us from solving global problems. And we gave a whole number of arguments in which this is true. In Syria, Russia has prevented us from stopping the slaughter of innocents because their friend Assad is the one that is committing the slaughter. In Israel, the United States has prevented us from saving innocent Palestinian lives because their friend, Israel, is the one committing the atrocities. The only argument the other team has made is that the veto somehow prevents rash action. However, our argument is that if there were a majority vote between the 12 Security Council members, 12 minds are greater than 1. And 12 minds could also decide to prevent rash action that would cause escalation. Furthermore, their argument about how if we get rid of the veto, there would no longer be legitimacy to the UN is also completely ridiculous, because the fact that those countries would still be participating in the UN, whether it's the United States, China, or Russia, they just wouldn't be able to have complete control and stop the will of the world. So because the United Nations should solve global problems, we should stop the undemocratic institution of the veto. Thank you.